All right, this is part two of the two-part expert session by George Do of LongTail Pro on keyword research. If you have not watched part one, please go and watch that and then make your way to this video as part two.
And the final option to expand on your C keywords is to use keyword tools. And you might be thinking, wait, if there are tools, why did we spend all this time doing all this other stuff? There's two reasons. Firstly, it's important to know whatever product you're selling, it's important to know it well and know the niche well. And using a tool isn't going to give you that. Doing all these other things will give you the background information that you need to understand your product and to understand your customers better, which in the long run is helpful. The other thing is obviously, tools are useful, but only in the right person's hands. And so when you use keyword tools, it's really important you remember what your goal is, right? It goes back to what we talked about at the beginning. Search intent and, doing all these other things helps you understand better what it is that we're looking for. Basically, having done all these other things, you understand the process and why we're looking for what we're looking for. Then you can use the tools to kind of streamline your process. So there was a time when Google AdWords, the Google AdWords keyword tool, was kind of the best free tool available. That's no longer the case because they no longer provide easy access to it. You have to sign up for an AdWords account and set up a campaign to be able to get access to it. So the free tool that we like is Ubersuggest. But there are kind of alternatives. You can use that one right there, keywordtool.io. But we prefer Ubersuggest. We're just going to jump into here and search trekking pole and see what comes up. And I'm viewing this as text. I'm going to copy it into my spreadsheet. And again, the reason why all of those other steps before were important is so you know what you should be looking for. Because some of these keywords will be good and relevant. Some of them will be totally irrelevant. And you can just scroll through and immediately see like trekking pole reviews 2014, definitely not relevant. We can just delete a whole bunch there right off the bat. Trekking pole with ice axe, potentially relevant. Trekking pole wiki, if you're running an e-commerce store, definitely not relevant. Trekking pole with camera mount is relevant. Some of these trekking pole versus something else could potentially be relevant if you want to try to rank for pages that aren't selling anything. Trekking pole ultralight, twist lock, trail running. A lot of these are basically the ones I'm bolding are potentially relevant, and the ones that I'm not are kind of ones that you want to ignore. So like trekking pole Philippines, definitely not useful to you if you're trying to sell, unless you're trying to sell to the Philippines specifically. Trekking pole Nordic walking. So basically, once you kind of know the thinking behind the keyword research process, you can, throw a couple of C keywords into tools like Ubersuggest, spit out like hundreds of keywords, and then just go through them and see what look interesting to you and what are irrelevant to you. So now we've got kind of a pretty reasonable list of keywords, at least to start off with. We should start thinking about what makes a good keyword. What makes a keyword that you want to target? So, you look at this chart here, and it falls to four factors. The first is keyword competitiveness. The second is keyword profitability. The third is keyword volume. And the fourth is keyword relevance. So in our research so far, we've really only looked at keyword relevance. We've been searching for trekking pole related terms, and we've gotten back, anti-shark trekking pole, etc., which are definitely relevant to the trekking pole niche. But we haven't filled in these three other quadrants. And honestly, it's difficult to do this without using a paid tool like LongTail Pro. So we're just going to quickly go over what each of these other three terms mean. Keyword volume is basically how many people are searching for that search term. So if 10,000 or 5,000 people search for trekking poles a month, that's your keyword volume. Keyword profitability is basically how much money would you make if you're ranking in the #1 spot for a keyword. So a keyword like buy diamond rings would have much higher keyword profitability than something like buy nails, right? Because diamond rings cost a lot more than nails, and so whoever's ranking for that top spot on a per visitor basis would earn a lot more if they were ranking for buy diamond rings. Keyword competitiveness is basically how hard it is for somebody to rank in Google. And in many cases, it's tied to keyword profitability because, as you would imagine, the more profitable it is to rank for a keyword, the more people want to rank for that keyword, and the more competitive it is. But when we look at long tail keywords, there are sometimes gaps in the sense that it's possible to find keywords that are quite profitable that are quite uncompetitive. And essentially, what we're looking for when we look for keywords to target is we're looking for keywords that tick all of these 4 boxes. Reasonably low keyword competitiveness, reasonably high keyword profitability, good keyword relevance to your niche, and pretty good keyword volumes. So we're just going to jump into LongTail Pro here. This is the software that I work on, and I'm going to show you why I think it's worth investing in it compared to using something like Ubersuggest. And I'm just going to put in tracking polls and ask for 150 results back. And these results will come back pretty quickly. There we go. 150 keywords have come back. And the important thing about LongTail Pro is that it doesn't just cover keyword relevance, which is what Ubersuggest does. It covers all 4 quadrants. So we show keyword volume. We show average keyword competitiveness. That takes a little while to load because it pulls in a lot of data about the individual sites that are ranking for that keyword term. But that basically measures difficulty. And then we have rank value also, which measures keyword profitability. So we're just gonna, skip ahead about 30 seconds here, so that all these KC numbers have come back, and you can see how well organized everything is. You have your keywords, your volume, your rank value, which is keyword profitability, and then your keyword competitiveness. And the first thing I want to show you is how rank value works, just because we're not going to delve into that anymore. Basically, you can set custom rank values. This is what you would use if you were running an e-commerce store, and depending on your visitor value, which is basically how much each visit to your site generates in earnings for you, you can set custom rank value for each of these keywords. So we're just gonna filter everything here by keyword competitiveness. I want to exclude everything with KC greater than 40, and we have about 100 keywords here, a little more than 100 keywords here, that we can look at to see if they're interesting for us to try to rank for. So again, the one thing that LongTail Pro doesn't do, this is more common sense, is to think about search intent. When you're looking through keywords in LongTail Pro, or in your Excel spreadsheet or any other tool, you really want to keep that in mind, because if you target a keyword like tracking poll reviews on your site that sells tracking polls and doesn't provide tracking poll reviews, chances are you're not going to rank, because Google knows that your type of site is not the type of site that people want to see if they're searching for tracking poll reviews. On the other hand, a keyword like walking poll for seniors, lightest tracking polls, basically a lot of these product focused keywords here are going to look pretty good, and I'm just adding these to our favorites as we go. And the favorites, they're just taking a little bit of time to load. Let's see. And another thing to keep in mind, some of these keywords that came back, like the Compradel, that's a brand name that we saw earlier on. We're not going to want to try and rank for somebody else's brand name, right? Again, that doesn't make sense. It comes back to search intent. Titanium trekking pole, ultralight trekking pole definitely is something that's interesting from earlier. Carbon trekking poles, and again, notice how some of these keywords that we're looking at are things that we've already looked at. And that's the point of being able to go through the process that we just went through to get to this point. You can see that many of the methods that we used earlier could potentially work, even if you don't have a paid tool like LongTail Pro to confirm it. Lightweight walking poles, carbon fiber hiking poles, lightweight trekking poles, and generally for users of LongTail Pro, especially people who are just starting out, we recommend you target keywords with keyword competitiveness lower than 35. If you do have a more established e-commerce site, a site that's been around for a year or two, then that's when you want to start going up to like 40 KC. And you can see how LongTail Pro makes doing this such a breeze. I'm just marking all these. I'm going to add them all to my favorites. And I'll have a list of about probably 30 targetable keywords for my trekking pole e-commerce site. And I can sort them by difficulty, by volume. So depending on my specific needs, I can decide which keywords I want to target first and which keywords I want to target later on. Just copy all these to my favorites folder. So I'm just gonna find a keyword to go in a little bit more depth into. And that's just to show you all the different stats that go into calculating keyword competitiveness. None of these look that good. Let's see. So something like titanium trekking poles. I'm just going to click through here. And this table of numbers might be very confusing to you at first, but basically these are all the factors that we use to calculate keyword competitiveness. Starting off with what you see on the far left, the titles. So as you can see, some of the words are bolded, and basically those bolded words are words that exist in the search query. So titanium trekking poles, none of these pages are targeting titanium trekking poles other than the very last result there. None of these pages have that exact keyword in them except for the last result. So that's a good sign. Some of the other metrics that we take into account are things like trust flow and citation flow, which are SEO metrics. Trust flow basically measures how many authoritative links there are to a page, and citation flow measures how many links in general there are to a page. The same thing with domain trust flow and domain citation flow, except that they're for the whole site versus just a page. External backlinks to a page, how many backlinks basically there are to any given page. Page referring domains measures how many referring domains, so basically how many websites versus specific pages link back to this specific page. Root referring domains is the same thing, except it's how many websites in general link back to this website in general. Index URLs is how many pages are indexed in Google for this site. And then internal links, how many links there are from within the site, and site age is self-explanatory. It's how old the site is. So as you can see, a lot of thought and a lot of information has gone into calculating keyword competitiveness to come up with kind of one easy score for you to look at. For more advanced users of LongTail Pro, we do have some kind of like recommendations and guidance as to how to look at these stats individually. But I'm not going to go into that because I'm basically running out of time here. But essentially the takeaway here is that keyword competitiveness is not just something we kind of made up out of thin air. You know, before we started working on LongTail Pro, we were building websites and trying to rank for them in Google. So we kind of know broadly what goes into whether or not you rank and whether or not it's easy to rank for a specific keyword. And keyword competitiveness is basically the culmination of all that information into one score. And you can see how having that stat available to you would make it much easier for you to do keyword research versus some of the other methods we've shared today. So I'm just going to jump back to this chart here. You know, it is possible to do keyword research without a tool like LongTail Pro. It just takes much, much longer and is basically much less efficient. And it's a lot more like shooting in the dark because you don't have access to all 4 of these quadrants. You basically only have keyword relevance and you're stuck more or less guessing for the rest of these factors. And that's why, you know, I do highly recommend LongTail Pro, especially if you want to hit the ground running with your keyword research and you don't want to waste time targeting keywords that don't turn out to be good, or you don't want to waste time doing a lot of in-depth keyword research that takes a lot of time and doesn't yield the best results. That being said, you know, there are free alternatives. There is a way to do this without using a tool like LongTail Pro. It is going to be a lot more time consuming. So one option is you could install free Chrome add-ins like SEOQuake and Mozbar. They'll give you some alternative metrics. In this case, if you're using these specific ones, you should mainly look at a DA, which is domain authority, PA, which is page authority, and site age. And you can download these specific toolbars at these URLs right there. The metrics aren't as comprehensive as KC. KC is a really good all-in-one metric. But you know, these metrics, they're available for free and they're kind of a good start if you want to go that route. This is what the free tools look like. They basically overlay in your browser. They add a little bit of a thing under search results when you search stuff in Google. And you know, you can see there PA and DA for any given page. And then the SEOQuake toolbar shows you, you know, a bunch of different metrics. Things like PageRank, which is kind of an outdated metric. Site age is in there. And there are some other metrics which, you know, you might find useful. Once again, though, you know, we do recommend LongTail Pro. I do think it's the easiest way to do keyword research. And, you know, for those of you who are interested in a kind of faster and more effective way to do your keyword research, LongTail Pro does come with a 7-day trial. There's also, you know, keep in mind there's a lot more information to delve into. This lesson was really just a very brief and broad overview, and I did try to focus on e-commerce more. But you know, once you're in the app, with the 7-day trial comes something called LongTail Bootcamp, which is a sequence of 14 videos which go through kind of every step in the keyword research process, from, you know, idea and niche generation to keyword discovery, content creation, and on-page optimization. So, you know, it takes you through the keyword research process and through the content creation process. You know, and hopefully you'll give LongTail Pro a try, and if you don't like it, you can always cancel your trial. I hope you've learned something from this lesson about keyword research, even if you don't end up trying out LongTail Pro as a product. And remember, you know, understanding search intent is very important. Knowing out how to find like variations on your seed keyword is important. And targeting long tail keywords is the way you want to go, because long tail keywords is the only way that you'll meet all 4 of those keyword quadrants: keyword competitiveness, keyword profitability, keyword volume, and keyword relevance. So, you know, keep those in mind, and good luck with your keyword research.